Good afternoon, PSD Global Academy. I know most of you know me. I'm Brad Avery, and this year I'm serving as the interim principal at PGA, as well as PSD Options, which is a new experience for me. And I truly am excited to be taking on this role, even despite the challenges that we face this next year as we figure out how to return to school. I wanted to offer a message that gives a little bit of context in my thinking that has evolved quite a bit this week, particularly with the district announcement that came out on Monday and listening to a small group of parents on Wednesday that offered some feedback about their thinking about their concerns about returning to school and their wonderings about how we can negotiate that partnership with PGA to hopefully find a solution that works well for all of our families. So I wanted to give a little video message, offer some context and some of the options that I'm going to present in a survey to you that is included in this email. And hopefully we can get some feedback from families about what their thinking is so it can help us with our planning. I want to be clear that I can't promise at this point in time which options we're going to pursue at PGA because this hinges largely on working with my staff and figuring out what they can support as well. One of the things that I am not okay with is significantly increasing the workload of the teachers in my building because they already work very hard, as I'm sure many of you know. And with the uncertainty around all these different plans and opening, I have some concerns just about how we support academic excellence for our students and not burn out our teachers at the same time. So let me go ahead and share some of my thinking. In the parent feedback group, we heard some information about just concerns about families bringing their kids back on campus. And I have a wondering about how widespread that is, and that's part of the intent of the survey. Another piece is that, as you know, Poudre School District is offering a fully online option through a program called PSD Virtual. And one of the things that hadn't dawned on me entirely until that parent meeting this week was that while PSD Virtual is an option that is attractive to a lot of families at traditional schools in Poudre School District, some of the families at PGA are struggling with that choice simply because our model was already closer to that. And so they're struggling with, do I make the choice to go to PSD Virtual and leave the community that I know and love at PGA? Or do I choose to stick it out at PGA? One of the things I can offer right now is that even if you do end up choosing to attend PSD Virtual, your child is still co-enrolled at PGA, and we will still have opportunities to communicate, offer feedback, and find ways to make sure that we're keeping your child and you as a learning coach connected to our community so that when we do get on the flip side of the circumstances that we're experiencing right now, that you will be able to seamlessly integrate back into our PGA community and hopefully feel like you didn't miss a beat at all. But even with that information being shared, one of the other perspectives that I gained was the fact that PSD Virtual, even though it's being led by Cheryl, and you all know Cheryl and appreciate her leadership at PGA over the last 4 years, part of the structure of PSD Virtual is being set up so that there are some routines and pieces that are familiar to families around the district who would have never considered going online in the first place. And that's a bit of a struggle because it feels like that means that you won't have the same kinds of freedom that you always enjoyed at PSD Global Academy. So the question that I heard from folks at the meeting this Wednesday was, why can't PSD Global Academy offer an online option for families? And I've been thinking about that a lot in the weeks prior to this one, but I really couldn't go too far down that road until I knew how the district was going to open for the beginning of the school year. And now, since that information has become more clear, it's sharpened my thinking on this. One of the things that I'm looking at is just how do we offer options in a way that we don't create situations that just aren't sustainable or supportable by my staff in school. So I'm trying to narrow everything down to basically two options. And this will be what you see in the survey. Option number one would be that we go ahead and start the school year largely in line with what Poudre School District is doing. So we're going to be basically in a phase 3, phase 4 type scenario where all of the students are on campus. Now, one important note is that remember that even when PSD is in phase 4, for PSD Global Academy, it's kind of like we're in phase 3 because we only ever had kids on campus 2 days to 3 days a week in the past. And that's the hybrid option, phase three for the district. For us, that's going to be how we're going to be operating if we're in a situation where we have students on campus like that. So one of the things that's nice about PGA is we already have a circumstance in which students aren't on campus as often as 5 days a week like you would see in traditional schools. We would be looking at maintaining the structure that we have our K through 8 students on campus on Tuesday and Thursday, and we would have our 9 through 12 students on campus on Monday and Wednesday with a couple Thursday electives for some students. If we went with that plan, we would obviously be looking at preserving social distancing and following Denver County Department of Health guidelines, wearing masks in the classrooms, and having specific plans about how students enter and exit the building, and how we manage lunches and restrooms and all sorts of things, just to make sure that we can keep a safe environment for our students. So even though we would be on campus, there would be some things that would be changing with instruction. With students on campus, we wouldn't be able to do the kind of group activities where students are gathering around a table, having collaboration and communication with each other, because we're going to have the students sitting 4 to 6 feet apart from each other. So even if we are on campus, the education experience is going to look different than it has in the past for this upcoming school year, just so we can work on and focus on that safety aspect. Option 2 is an option that I'm going to offer, but like I said, I can't promise that this is something that we can really do. I just want some feedback on how parents feel about if this would be an attractive option to you if it were something we were able to do at PSD Global Academy. And this would be basically that the PGA would be returning largely in a phase 2 type scenario. So what we'd be doing is stating that all of our instruction would be happening online. And this wouldn't necessarily be a year-long decision. Likely this would be probably a decision for the first semester of the school year. And we could evaluate at early in the second semester or towards the end of the first semester to figure out if it makes sense to adjust course or to continue with the plan that we've been executing. The reason why I say phase 2 is because we would basically be delivering all instruction online. However, we would be able to have some kids on campus for supports as needed. So this could look like a few different things at different levels, whether it's elementary, middle, or high school. And part of this is highly contingent upon what my staff and I are able to figure out what we can support. But it could include situations like if you were a family that you said, yeah, I really like the idea of the online piece, but I need my kids to be able to get some time on campus still, and I'm okay and comfortable with that. That could still happen in this online model, where your child could come, if they were a middle school or elementary school kid, they could come on Tuesday or Thursday, and what they would be getting is not their typical classroom direct instruction that they normally get on campus. It would be more of an office hours, open lab, intervention time scenario, where teachers would be able to meet with small groups of students to be able to get them the extra supports they need to be successful academically. And we would still be following social distancing protocols, but the likely belief is that the numbers of students we would have on campus would be much smaller, so it'd be much easier to work out the social distancing protocols and be able to keep students and staff safe in these circumstances. At elementary, we even have an opportunity to be a little creative and return to a past practice from several years ago. We could look at a situation where families might say, if you want your kids to have access to specials and you're comfortable with them being on campus, even in this option 2, kids could come to campus for a portion of time in the afternoon and get their art, music, or PE instruction, and they could maybe get a little bit of science instruction from the teacher, and then be able to return home. Again, this is a lot of hypotheticals and nothing solid yet, but I just want to offer some perspectives of what this means, because I know when we say shift to full online, that could sound alarming to some families, and they'd be like, I really don't want to choose that. That's not why I chose PGA. I want you to know that this option would still allow for opportunities for students to be on campus, particularly elementary students under that scenario I just described. For some of our students that need extra supports or interventions, they could come in the mornings as well and get that support as needed from their teachers. The key thing about this option, and the reason why I say all of the instruction would be delivered online for like the courses, and then students would simply be receiving intervention and support on campus, is because if I try and ask my teachers to be prepared to teach on campus to a certain group of students, but then on the same day they also need to teach online to a different group of students, that's where the workload issue comes in, because they're basically teaching twice as much as they used to, but we aren't spreading it out across any more days, and that really becomes a challenge. So So that's a little bit of the thinking. Like I said, at middle school, the same kind of thing. If you really was said, yeah, gosh, this online option sounds nice, but I do want my kids to be able to come on campus a little bit, they could still come on campus on Tuesdays or Thursdays to get that extra support from teachers in the middle school team. And likewise, we could look at a situation where high school students are able to come on campus on Mondays or Wednesdays to get support from teachers on the high school team, either just for specific classes or if there are specific academic interventions they need. The other caveat that would go along with this is that if a family did decide to opt into this online option, which obviously this would have to be kind of a whole school kind of decision, but let's just say we went down that path this year and we saw a family that was struggling with their students being academically successful. As a school, we would certainly be looking at figuring out what can we do to support those students and figure out how we address some of those concerns. And that may mean that we need to negotiate the possibility of asking for your child to be on campus on one of those days where they would have normally been on campus to get some extra supports to be successful. It wouldn't necessarily result in that because obviously some first steps would be, working with the family to say, hey, can we just beef up some time around this? Or can we do a remote connection with the teacher to be able to check in with the kid or those kinds of things? So I'm not saying it would be an absolute scenario that the kid would be asked to come back on campus because we know a lot of families are just have significant concerns around their kid being on campus. And we can absolutely work around those, but we still do just want to monitor that academic progress and make sure that students are hitting learning targets and goals as we progress through the school year. One thing I want to be very clear on is if we did pursue this option too, it would not look like what we saw in the spring, because the spring circumstance came up very quickly without a lot of planning, and it was a very quick response to some significant changes in the landscape around the pandemic. This year, we would be able to be much more intentional in our planning and supports for kids. And as I said, since we would be able to have kids come on campus if needed, and as long as parents are comfortable with that, we'd have quite a bit of flexibility around what these opportunities could look like. I know I've probably talked longer than most of you really wanted to listen, but I did really want to offer some context on this before you engage in that survey, because I think it's important to know that as you're thinking about, well, what decisions would I be okay with? Again, I can't promise where we're going to land in this. I'm going to be talking with teachers this next week to get feedback from them, and that coupled with the feedback that we're getting from families is going to inform some of the flexibilities we look at across our system to figure out what makes sense. Again, I'm just thinking real carefully about this because when I think about the scenarios that could come up this upcoming school year, there are some challenges that we face. In the planning that we've already done, we've got some thinking about how we're going to be able to keep K through 8 students in classroom cohorts so that we're minimizing student interactions across different groups of students. So we wouldn't have like third graders interacting with kindergartners because that just increases opportunities for issues if there were a possible case. So we would be able to really mitigate a lot of that by keeping our students in cohort classrooms. Obviously, they'd still be able to interact with their peers and get a very good this feels like school kind of experience. It's a little more challenging at the high school level just because of the very nature of high school classes. We have kids that are accelerated in some classes. We have some kids that are needing to catch up on a class. And so we just don't have clean grade level assignments in high school to make that same kind of feature work. But the reason why I bring that up is because let's say we come into a case this upcoming year where we're proceeding with option one. We're on campus. We're kind of doing what we expect to be doing in typical school years, and there's a concern that a student might have coronavirus. Then we're going to go through the steps in the process with the Lerma County Department of Health to do some contact tracing and identify and figure out who we need to quarantine for a 10 to 14 day time frame so that we can make sure that everybody's safe. But then the question that comes up is, what about siblings? So hypothetically, if we just said a sophomore was the student that we were concerned about, and we looked at where they were seated in high school classrooms, we identified students that were closest to them, and we quarantined the appropriate level of high school students, we still could see an impact at other grade levels where we say, well, what if there was a 9th grader in that room that sat right next to that 10th grader that happens to have a 4th grade sibling? Now that 4th grade sibling is likely going to be quarantined as well, which means now I'm thinking my 4th grade teacher is still going to be delivering classroom instruction to 4th grade students, but then they're going to have to be thinking about how do I support the online learning for these 1 to 2 kids that are in quarantine. And when I think about these type of things happening, it just becomes really challenging. And obviously we can't plan around a hypothetical, but the likelihood is that at some point in time in the school year, that something like this may happen, and it may happen more frequently than we expected. than we expect. It might happen more rarely than we expect. We just don't know at this point in time. But when I think about that, and I think about, we have an opportunity to maybe define a little more consistent educational experience for our students by thinking about opting into online, and still having opportunities for students to be on campus for the extra supports that are needed. I think that's something I need to offer that option to families, and let them know that that's something we're thinking about, even though I can't promise or guarantee it. I know some of my staff members would like to be concerned in saying that gosh, I can think about what my instruction looks like on campus, and I feel like that's a lot more manageable than trying to take this class online. And my thinking right now is, I think about a social studies classroom where students are typically engaged in conversation. With our social distancing and spacing, those conversations won't be the same this year anyways. When I think about a science lab and students working in partners in a lab in the past, that's likely not going to happen with the requirements we have in place for in-classroom instruction. So when I think about those kinds of things, I realize that the jump from the in-class instruction to the online instruction might not be as significant as we're thinking right now, simply because of the way that in-class instruction would look this year, given the requirements that we're looking at having to follow. So again, I don't want to, I'm not trying to encourage anybody to think one way or the other. I just want our community to know that at PSD Global Academy, we're being very thoughtful about this. We're trying to attend to the needs of our families and recognize where they're coming from, and recognize that our families are left in a slightly different space than the rest of the district. I myself, I can tell you right now, I have a daughter, just one daughter. She's starting kindergarten this year, and my wife and I made the decision to opt into PSD virtual for her. Now, that was a little bit different because our neighborhood school is Bethke, and when I thought about her being on campus 5 days a week, for my wife and I, that was a little bit of a concern. And when I thought about what the shifting instruction could look like through the school year from switching between the phases and a potentially uneven schooling experience, I thought maybe my wife and I can just offer a little bit more consistency if we opt into virtual for this school year. So we made that decision. But again, I recognize for our PSD Global community, the decision isn't as straightforward as that, because we've already enjoyed some flexibilities and some different structures in the way that instruction happens at PSD Global Academy. So that's why I wanted to reach out, offer the survey, and give some context. Again, I apologize for the length of this video, but I want people to be able to make an informed selection when they're looking at the survey and choosing an option. And please know that we're going to do our best at PSD Global Academy to support each of our families as we navigate these challenging times. And I look forward to serving you throughout this school year. Thanks so much for listening.